What if the bedtime stories we tell our children aren't just stories? What if, in the quiet darkness of the night, something listens a shadow lurking just beyond the light? Tonight, you'll hear the chilling tale of a father and son, a bedtime story that should never have been told, and the dark presence that answered their call. Some stories open doors that can't be closed. Are you ready to step into the shadows? It all started on an unassuming winter night, the kind where the cold seeps through even the thickest blankets and the wind outside whispers secrets you're better off not knowing. My son Ethan was restless, tossing and turning in his bed. His usual bedtime story routine wasn't working, so I decided to tell him something I remembered from my own childhood, a story my grandmother used to tell me. Looking back, I should have known better. The story, as I remembered it, was about a shadow named Dusk. It wasn't your average childhood tale about princesses or dragons. No, this was darker. My grandmother used to tell me that dusk wasn't a shadow like the ones cast by the sun or a lamp. It was alive, and it only appeared to children who were curious enough to look for it. Dusk waits, she used to say, for the moment you call its name. Ethan's eyes lit up with curiosity when I began. He loved anything mysterious, and I could see him hanging on to every word as I described how dusk would slither out from corners, hidden between the edges of light and darkness. But what happens if you call dusk? Ethan asked, his small voice breaking the stillness of the room. I paused, unsure of how to answer. In truth, my grandmother never finished the story. She would always shake her head and say, some stories are better left untold, but Ethan was insistent, so I improvised. If you call dusk, I said, lowering my voice to a whisper, it comes. And once it does, it never leaves. Ethan's face shifted, a mixture of fear and fascination. But eventually he yawned and rolled over. I kissed his forehead, turned off the light, and left the room. I had just settled into my chair with a book when I heard him. Ethan's voice, soft but clear, drifting from his room. Dusk, he said, are you real? I froze. The silence that followed felt too heavy, too deliberate. I stood up and went to his room, my heart pounding. Ethan, I whispered, pushing the door open. He was sitting up in bed, staring at the far corner of the room. The moonlight through the window didn't quite reach it, leaving it in shadow. What are you looking at? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Dusk, he said simply. It's here. My stomach dropped. Ethan, it's just a story, I said, stepping into the room. There's nothing there. But as I turned to the corner, I saw it. A shadow darker than the others, shifting ever so slightly, as though it were alive. The air in the room grew cold, and an unnatural stillness pressed down on us. I grabbed Ethan and turned on the light, but the shadow remained, now stretched across the floor like a stain. Ethan clung to me, his small body trembling. It said my name, he whispered. I didn't know what to do. My rational mind told me it was just a trick of the light, but deep down I knew this was something else. That night, I moved Ethan into my room. I didn't sleep, I couldn't. Every creak of the house, every whisper of the wind, felt like a threat. The next morning, the shadow was gone, but the house didn't feel right. The air was heavy, the corners darker than they should have been. Ethan refused to go back to his room, and I didn't argue. Days turned into weeks, and the presence in the house grew stronger. Lights flickered, doors creaked open on their own, and shadows seemed to move when you weren't looking. Ethan became quieter, his once cheerful demeanor replaced with a solemn silence. One night, as I was tucking him into my bed, he said something that chilled me to the core. Dusk doesn't like the light, he whispered. But it's getting braver. I tried to comfort him, telling him it was all in his imagination, but I wasn't so sure anymore. That night, I woke up to the sound of Ethan whispering. I turned over to find him sitting up, staring at the corner of the room. My heart raced as I followed his gaze, and there it was, the shadow, darker and larger than before. I grabbed a flashlight from the bedside table and shone it at the corner, but the beam didn't cut through the darkness. It only seemed to make it grow, the edges of the shadow curling like smoke. Ethan, come here, I said, my voice shaking. He didn't move. Ethan, I shouted, reaching for him. The shadow moved. It stretched across the floor, slithering toward the bed. I pulled Ethan into my arms and ran out of the room, slamming the door behind us. I didn't stop running until we were outside, standing in the freezing night air. I held him close, his small body trembling against mine. We didn't go back inside until the sun came up. When we did, the house was eerily quiet. Nothing was out of place, but I could feel it. Dusk was still there, waiting. I called a priest, a paranormal investigator, anyone I thought could help. But nothing worked. The presence in the house only grew stronger, and Ethan began to change. He stopped speaking, his once bright eyes dull and lifeless. One night, I woke up to find him standing at the foot of my bed. His face was pale, his eyes dark as shadows. Dusk wants you to finish the story, he said in a voice that wasn't his own. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't leave, couldn't stay, couldn't fight something I didn't understand. And so, here I am, telling you this story. I don't know how it ends because deep down I fear it never does. Dusk isn't just a shadow, it's a presence, a curse, and once it finds you, it never truly leaves. The lights are flickering as I write this. The corners of the room are darker than they should be. If you're listening to this, don't make the same mistake I did. Don't call its name. Don't let the shadows grow. Because dusk is always waiting, always watching, and now it knows you too.